Switching back to English, our third English speaker will be joining us with this new interesting concept called asset-based community development, ABCD. And the focus will be on things that we have, not what we're missing, but how can we use the existing resources that we have. He has done his master's thesis on the topic, diving in, seeing how these things work. He is working as a community worker, as an adult educator in Malta, and he's here with us to share his insights. How can we use the existing resources we have to actually get the learning going? And I think it's well connected to the previous topic as well about third places, that what kind of resources we have that we could build those third places upon it. So on the stage, please welcome Jenson Elsworth.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for that lovely introduction. Yes, I was going to say the same thing. I feel very grateful that I joined a bit earlier because Marco's presentation connects perfectly to this topic, so I'm grateful for that. I will share my screen so we can start. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure being here with all of you and, sharing all the same mindset, and it's a real honor to share the space with you. So, I will put this away. So the topic and the title of the presentation will be From What We Lack to What We Have, and so rethinking adult learning practices. To start off, a small introduction about me. Well, hello, I'm Jenson Elsworth. I'm very pleased to meet you all virtually. I'm a youth worker by profession. However, I currently work as a community development worker and adult educator. I hold a bachelor in youth and community studies, so specializing both in youth work and community development, and I recently concluded my master's in adult education. So to start off, so if you have any questions or need clarifications, just you can pause me, you can write in the chat, raise the hand button, so feel free to stop me anytime. So to start off, I believe that adult learning happens everywhere we go. Just like Marco said, there's the third places, and anywhere you meet with someone in family gatherings, community places, on the benches, in our homes, I believe that there is adult learning there. So in this presentation, we'll discuss that type of adult learning and how it can be transformed and designed with communities. Communities being the learners, people, adults, individuals, rather than us as adult educators doing it for them or to them. And this will be done by utilizing the asset-based approach, which focus on beginning on what we know, on our strengths, the community resources, our capabilities, our hobbies, rather than the weaknesses, the needs, or the deficits. So today's motto, I think the most important thing is the mindset for this approach is starting with what's strong, not with what's wrong. So usually when you enter within a learning community, within a classroom, we focus on what we need to learn, on our needs, and that is important. However, this approach takes it up a notch as we focus on the good things. What can the classroom offer to the same classroom? What we can teach each other? What we can share our experiences? And I think that is what adult learning and adult education is all about. So the asset-based community development is an approach to community work that focuses on identifying and mobilizing the strengths of the person, of the community, rather than focusing on the needs or the deficits. This I will explore this later on. It can be divided in different aspects. However, when you use this approach, you're going with the mindset of learning about the people you're going to work with, about the learning community, what they can offer back. So it's literally, yes, there is the educator, but everyone is educating each other with that open mindset. This approach was coined by John McKnight and Joy Kritzman as well, which they are from the Asset-Based Community Development Institute. As I mentioned, ABCD, it focuses that everyone can offer something to everyone else, to the community, to the group, to the classroom. So through asset-based, we see not the person not as a recipient of aid, but rather an active agent in the learning community. Everyone has their specific experience, and skill, so they can offer anyone can offer something to others. Local people are seen as co-producers of change, not just passive recipients. So it is very important that even within a classroom, within a presentation, unlike this one, people, are engaged and they are free to speak and discuss and offer their experience. Part of my master's, yes, we had the lecturer and the presentation, but we constantly discussed on what we learned, on our ideas, and this enriched the whole experience. So yes, people, adults, learners, everyone holds valuable knowledge, and we're not empty vessels. We have lots of information in our heads and our hearts that we are willing to share, and that's the beauty of adult education. So rather than asking, what is missing, what is the need, do we need to learn, we ask the question, what do we already have, and how can we build on what we have? As I mentioned, there are different type of assets which can be used within adult education. I will divide them into eight. There is the individual assets. So this is any asset that a person can offer. It can be either some type of knowledge about the community, about a specific job, teachers, etc. Practical skills, some people know how to draw, how to sing, how to dance, how to organize walks, how to facilitate. There are those different type of skills, and also, certain knowledge or passions within the community. The organizations, we believe that formal institutions like schools and the parish churches, the government, they can offer certain support to adult education. The associations are informal groups with shared interests. For example, in Malta, we have a lot of associations. For example, where I'm from, I will delve into the community to where I'm from a bit later. But it's just a community that has 2,000 residents only. It's very, very small. However, for a really small community, we have lots of associations related to feasts, to processions, football clubs. So these are all owned and facilitated by residents themselves. And this is a big asset. Cultural assets, which are museums, the traditions, the art, so the cultural aspect of a locality. The economic assets, so anything related to financial well-being, the shops, the banks, the businesses. The environmental assets, which are natural resources like gardens, parks, etc. Physical assets, I think it's very important within adult education as we can use tangible infrastructure such as buildings, playgrounds. They can be used to create adult education, to gather people there. And bumping places is very, very similar to third places, which Marco mentioned. These are informal locations where people naturally meet. So in a cafeteria, on the bench, near the beach in case of Malta, in a garden. It's just a normal place where people usually meet and speak. This is an example of all these assets. So, there is the community, and there are all these people, all of us, that can offer something to someone. It can be a person that willing to motivate people, a person who owns, I don't know, a car garage, a person who can make teddy bears. So everyone has their assets which can be used for collective learning. Now, to give you a bit to delve more into the topic. So, part of my master's dissertation, I focused on how adult education and community can link together. So, in community development, we believe that the answer, the solutions are brought from the individuals themselves. It's not just me, the professional, who will say what the solutions are, or I will, dictate and say, just my mindset. I go with a clear mind and ask people what they want within the community. And in this case, I focused what does the specific locality, what do the adults want to learn, and what do they want to achieve as time goes by, and most importantly, how can they contribute to their own learning. So, not for example, there's a person that's just going to come and teach English lessons, for example. it may be good, but we don't know. So we ask the community what they want to learn. Maybe they want to learn Spanish, woodwork, etc. And how can they support this process as well? So to give you an image, these are three photos from where I live in Birgu. The dissertation that I carried out was here. To give you an image of how it's surrounded, there are green spaces. It's an urban community. There's also the beach and some more photos. Birgu, although it's very small, as I mentioned, the population is around 2,000 residents, including children to senior citizens. It's very active. So there are a lot of activities going on, community walks, bingo games, there are a lot of activities for children, and it's a very active community, and the residents are willing to work for their community for voluntary work. They're really passionate. We are really passionate about our locality, and we offer all sorts of education, mostly for free as well. So to delve into the dissertation, as I mentioned, I focused on the needs. What do adults want to learn in this community? How can we contribute? And solutions on how the needs and the assets come together. So community development and adult education can work together to strengthen local skills, create social cohesion, and lifelong learning through community participation. Throughout this dissertation, I carried out a needs assessment. So I met with community leaders. Community leaders are people who are very, very involved in the community. For example, if you go to the parish priest, he meets a lot of residents, so he's a community leader. The local council. So these are people elected by politics and by votings, and they are well connected to the community. So I interviewed these people. I carried out a lot of surveys, questionnaires within the May Square. So I went around in the community and just built a conversation with people, asking them about what they want and what they can offer as well. And these are some results of how asset-based community development can work in terms of adult education. So there were countless needs, so I didn't write them, I forgot to write them, but a lot of people focused on literacy skills, intergenerational activities, so different generations teaching each other. So for example, a youth group can teach technological skills to senior citizens. However, the elderly can teach them, maybe craft skills or sewing skills or knitting and some other skills. There were civic education skills. So there are a lot of educational needs which they wanted to learn. And throughout, this research, there was an asset mapping process. So I mapped out the community's assets. So there were a list of needs, but how can we, address those needs together rather than finding people from outside Birgu who can teach these needs? We can teach each other. We can teach each other in the cafeteria, in the garden. So we explored these assets together. And the results were that Birgu has a lot of cultural history, active voluntary associations, a lot of people, adults, young people, and elders that want to help others. So there were a lot of assets to work on. And there was also a number of buildings which can be used for education. So there are a lot of, for example, the parish hall, the local council owns a hall, and they are all willing to there isn't funding involved, so funding is a big problem, and they are willing to offer these spaces for free, just for residents and for learners to meet and learn something together. So some of the findings were that community-led adult education, community-based adult education does work in such a small urban community because it's based on local identity. So the residents were given the space and the ownership to take action and take lead of their own learning rather than I decide, what they're going to learn, the syllabus or whatever. They decided what they want to learn, and this increases their motivation to actively participate. So, yes, it sustains participation, a sense of belonging. Sometimes all it needs is all a classroom, all a space. It needs a sense of belongings. When I attended a youth group when I was younger, I felt that I belonged there because I was given the space to create, to mess up, to make mistakes, but at the same time learn. So I was given, a lot of responsibility, which I wanted, and it helped me to belong there. And besides all these needs and assets, the residents showed that they don't want to focus only on formal learning by literacy skills, school subjects, but they wanted to explore their learning, explore their needs. And they focused on life skills as well, how to work with people, how to prepare for jobs, visiting museums and sharing their experiences. And as I mentioned, also intergenerational learning. So they explored the different recommendations. In Malta, adult education, I think it's quite strong. However, this approach, I think, increases the participation of adult education in terms of as the learner is taking the lead in their own learning. So it doesn't make sense if 20 people are interested in learning Estonian language, for example, and the lessons are going to be held at the northern part of Malta. Probably there are accessibility issues, transportation, so it doesn't make sense to make it so far away from their own community, but rather securing learning spaces within their community. It's easier for me to attend a lesson, a lecture, which is a few meters away, rather than I have to travel by car or by public transport, and it will make it hard to reach. They also suggested partnerships, so although we emphasize on the importance of sharing of skills and the residents and the learners helping each other, we cannot forget that institutions, schools, non-governmental organizations, they do support, maybe in microfunding in places, so they're very important as well. And also, tapping into intergenerational initiatives. Um, it- since we are a very small community, only 2,000 people, a lot of people I know them by face. So we have like it's very close knit community. So basically, I know all my neighbors within my street. So if there's a specific neighbor that wants to teach me something, it's easier for me to go to that person because I know him in a more informal way. So that helps as well. Naturally, every project, every adult learning, community development, they all counter obstacles. So the residents do focus on some obstacles as well, which were time constraints. I think it's the biggest issue we have in Malta. Everyone is so involved in everything, in the fees, in volunteer work, full-time job, part-time job, family, that we don't find time to learn and to educate ourselves. So that is why it's easier to carry out such adult education in their own community as it saves time. They also suggest online learning like this one. It would have been difficult for me to participate in such an interesting webinar. So through online learning, it's much feasible to meet and discuss as well. Oh, this is to give you a clear picture of what an asset map is. So this is a very small part of Malta. This is Birgu, the orange highlighted area is Birgu. It's very, very small. However, I added this to the presentation to give you an image of all those circles, all those, like I don't know what to call them, those markers, all are all different type of assets within the community. So, for example, the orange ones are people who like to share their skill. So they're translators, youth theatrical workers, seamstress, artists, dancers. The green are spaces where we can meet. The brown are cultural assets like museums. So this is such a small community, and there are a lot of assets which can contribute to adult education. So this gives you a small picture that all communities, all people have a lot of resources that can be utilized and tapped for adult education. So I spoke a lot of, the theory and how and the methodology, but to give more concrete examples, which were discussed and which were brought up in the dissertation that I have carried out. Um, for example, they suggested a language learning class, so they learn English. However, they specifically mentioned that they will talk with other residents. So, although it is a small community, there are a number of people who, they're called the expats. So, foreigners that came to live in Birgu and are willing, to share their talents, their skills, their culture. So, we found these residents, we built a relationship with them, and they are willing to share their English language skills with Maltese people who are not that comfortable speaking in English. So there's a peer-to-peer learning sort of. Another example are cultural outings. A few weeks ago, I created a presentation on intangible cultural heritage. We believe that cultural museums they're very important in adult education because, yes, in Malta we have a lot of history that we were colonized, we were attacked countless times, but that can be found on Google. We all know that stories, but the stories that the residents have, if my grandmother has a story, it's very nice to so that she can share the story and be part of the community's history. So we carry out cultural outings, we go to museums, and the tour guide is open to hear their story. So it's a two-way street. The tour guide is educating them about history, but the residents are educating him or her about their memories of what the museum used to be, for example. Other examples where there's digital literacy, as I mentioned, young people are they look forward to teach, their grandparents and their neighbors on how to use technology. Other examples were cooking sessions, craft skills workshops, intergenerational learning. So these are just examples of adult education within the community. But I go back to why ABCD is important in this aspect. The learner is not just a participant, so there isn't the educator just constantly feeding information like how I am doing at the moment. Everyone is a resource, so everyone has their own information that it's very important that it's shared. So because everyone have their own skill, their own passion, and I'm pretty sure that everyone has something to offer, and this is very highlighted in this approach. This is just a small table to I already explained this, but the process of of asset based how it works. So there's recognizing the assets, the recognizing the needs, and how these connect together to create sustainable development as well. Because I don't know, if I go to a community which is in the north of Malta, I don't know anyone, they don't know me, and I just go there for 2 hours and go back home. But however, if there is someone within their community that lives there, they are constantly being there. So people can refer to him anytime they would like to. They have stronger relationships, so the learning it's much richer as well. So that is why it's more sustainable because an education can keep going as they live there. But if I go for 2 hours and leave, I'm not part of that community. I mentioned some of this as well, the importance of asset-based and adult education. Everyone can bring their own experience and knowledge to the room, to the classroom. Lived experiences, this is the beauty of such webinars. We connect from different countries. My lived experience is different from yours, and we can teach each other about different experiences. It shifts learners from passive recipients to active contributors, as I mentioned. It encourages ownership. So if you ask someone to take ownership of what they want to learn, they're more excited, they're more motivated, and it enriches the whole experiences for the whole group in general. It promotes peer learning as well, as I mentioned. It builds a sense of confidence. So apart from attending a course about knitting or English, you're also building your confidence to speak with other people, creating social networks. You may find a neighbor, a friend, which that relationship can develop further apart from the classroom or from the learning community. So it has different um, benefits to it. To close off, as I know the time is concluding, and so a summary of what I mentioned. So asset-based community development focuses on what we know, what we already have, and how we can use what we have to sustain our own learning. There's a sense of partnership, so the education said learning is a two-way street. The educator is learning from the learners, and the learners are learning from the educator. I think that's the beauty of adult education, which sometimes may be different from, schools. Like when I was younger, I just used to listen to the teacher and I take notes, and that's it. But the adult education goes beyond, and that's the beauty of it, because we're partners. Everyone is learning from each other, and that makes the learning more exciting. And it's a sense of experiment. There isn't right or wrong, so it's very experimental. You may experiment on to learn knitting. maybe it doesn't work when you focus on other things, but that's the beauty of community. It's an experimental process. Everyone has their own journey. So it's quite experimental. You wouldn't know where it's going to take you. You might find a group of people that you will keep contact in all your life. Another experience you will maybe find or meet one person that you will keep continue talking to, but it's very different, for everyone, and each community-based adult learning is different. Yes, if you have any questions, we can feel free to ask, and also this presentation will be shared as well. So if you want any resources, information, or just to discuss more, that is my email. So feel free to email me at any time. We can discuss anything you would like to. So thank you.
Yes, Jensen, we have about 3 or 4 minutes for questions. First of
Perfect.
all, I like the whole premise of start with what's strong, not what is wrong. It kind of feels like this startup vibe. In startup world, there's this term of bootstrapping. It means that all the resources that you have available, you build your product with that, not using any venture capital money. And the concept of minimum viable product, something that works, it's not perfect, but something that works. So I felt this bridge over these two topics, and it's not the perfect training that you will get from the neighbor, but it's something you can get immediately and you can get it done. The big question on the long run, I think the positive effect on the long run will be the cultural shift that we don't ask that the government should do something, what we ask, what can we do in our village already to be that way. But on the big long term, the question is, what will be the stimulus, the motivator for those who are on the giving side? So those who are giving their time for the dancing classes, who are offering their rooms for that. One time is one thing, but if their talent is often used, what do you see will be the stimulus to make it work on the long run?
Yes, that is a very important question. I literally face this question every day in my work. Yes, as I mentioned, some of the work may be voluntary, so to keep up the motivation to continue a certain dance lesson, for example, the motivation has to be very high. But in this context, where I carried out the dissertation, it's a very small community, so the people have strong ties to the locality they live in. So for them, it's how do you say it? It gives a sense of pride and a sense of accomplishment as they're giving back to the community. However, at the same time, that some of the residents did mention that although funding is not always available, local councils, the parish funding is still important at a certain extent. If a project is going to, a program is going to keep going for years, not everyone can offer free time per year, so some microfunding, well, it is beneficial. However, I think it's these two. So although there is voluntary work, you still keep in mind funding opportunities to fund, professionals to carry out this work. The professionals may be your neighbor, so that's a win-win. And at the same time, since they're giving back to the community, well, that's very common. If I live in a particular community to give back, we have very strong ties to where we live. So the motivation it's quite sustainable. It's a sense of accomplishment giving back to where you live.
Mm-hmm. So we have a couple of questions. People often, Valeria is asking, people often want to learn from the masters and may undervalue the experience of someone next to them. How can this be solved?
Yes, but sometimes I think we forget that the masters may be our neighbors. So our neighbor isn't just the person that we see outside, buying groceries. Our neighbor may be a lecturer. Another neighbor may be someone who has worked 20 years, for example, as an artist. So everyone has their own potential and their own professional life that they can share with each other as well. Sometimes, we forget that maybe the professionals and the masters are only in university, for example, but it doesn't have to be that way. For example, I don't don't work at the university, but I still work with young people within the community, and still they see me, sort of as a master because I carry out youth work. So that is something important to remember, that the masters are not within a formal institution only. They can be someone that we know in the community that has a lot of experiences as well.
I'm reading the currently. One remark or question, it's about mapping the skills, but also there's a question, how do people verbalize the skills or the assets that they have? Because if you would have people in the room and we would ask everyone, so share, what kind of assets do you have? It is very likely that only 10% of the assets that they actually have, they're able to verbalize, and they are not even aware of the gold mine that they have. How do you culturally or somehow help people to notice more of that what they could actually give to the community?
That's a very interesting question for who asked it. Yes, community development and adult education, I think it's a very long process. So even when I carried out the dissertation, if I found someone outside and asked him what their skills are, as you mentioned, probably they'd say, I don't know, maybe I know how to work with wood, for example, and just that. But constant communication, for example, even where I work, I meet the people constantly. I go around the street, so there is the constant communication, constant emphasis on relationship. Relationship building is very, very important to a certain extent, where they trust you and they're willing to share with you. And there are also other resources which I shared with a group of Erasmus students, I think a month ago. There are certain resources which you can reflect on yourself, on the skills that you can offer. And this can be offered into 4 or 5, I'm not sure. So, some skills that you can offer with your hands. So you simplify the type of skills, so it will be easier to understand on what skills you can offer. So there are the skills you can do with your hands, for example, related to the mind, so the knowledge, the passions. For example, you love the environment, you love animals. So there are certain tools, and they are called the gift of the heart, hand, and head. I can share this as well. So it breaks down the type of skills a person can offer. So it will be easier for you to reflect on yourself and see what you can offer.
Thank you, Jenson. So we'll have one well-being break, and then we'll continue with the Estonian presentations. But thank you for sharing the concept and kind of building this image in our mind, how communities could actually kind of synergize with each other. Thank you, Jenson.
Thank you for inviting me and for your attention.